the earth shakes, and just a few meters away, a Soviet T-34 appears, accompanied by 3 others. But on the other side, the earth trembles again with the advance of a group of Panzer IVs. It is July 1943, and in the vicinity of the village of Prokhorovka, the largest tank battle in history is about to begin. The conflict is known as the Battle of Kursk, which began with Operation Citadel, a powerful German counterattack following the Nazi defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad. That marked a new turning point in favor of the Allies. However, to this day, the true effectiveness of the Soviet advance is debated. How did this battle come about? And what happened for the Red Army to emerge victorious? We invite you to discover it in the next few minutes of this video. So make yourself comfortable and prepare to travel back in time. In July 1943, 5 months had passed since the triumph of the Soviet Union in the city of Stalingrad. Perhaps the greatest example of Order Number 227, launched by Joseph Stalin, which demanded not a step back. But there was still a long way to go. The next step would be a kind of war within the war, starring the stellar technology of the time, the tanks. If the Great War had marked the first, and crude, attempt of the armored vehicles, the Second World War already placed them as the central element of support. The prime example had been Germany's blitzkrieg tactics to conquer much of Europe. Now, the Soviet Union was about to demonstrate its own firepower. Since March 1943, the Soviets had a defensive fortification west of the city of Kursk, a strange ledge that stretched 240 kilometers from north to south and up to 160 kilometers into German territory. At that time, the Nazis had been successful south of Kursk. So, in July, and after a couple of postponements determined by Adolf Hitler himself, they decided to attack north and south of the salient by surprise. The plan was to capture the city's industry and railways. The result? The surprise factor of Operation Citadel was frustrated. The Russians had anticipated the offensive. They not only had time to prepare high-end vehicles, trenches, anti-tank traps, and about 1 million mines with half of them destined for the armored vehicles, but they also removed troops from the most logical impact sites. By July 12th, more than 900 German tanks were crashing into 900 other Russian vehicles near the village of Prokhorovka. There, the Russian troops, commanded mainly by Georgy Zhukov, stopped the advance of Paul Hauser's divisions, general of the SS, transforming the event into a decisive one. Within the panorama of noise, fire, smoke, and dust that made breathing almost impossible, the Russians contributed more than 3,600 tanks, including the updated T-34 with an 85mm cannon, while the Germans had around 2,700 tanks, with their classic Panzer III and IV, the new Panther, and the dreaded Tiger. An experienced Soviet sniper could stop a Tiger by shooting at its driver, but almost nothing else could stop it, declared war photographer Anatoly Yegorov in a phrase collected by the BBC website. It should be mentioned that more than 800,000 German troops participated against almost 2 million Soviet troops. Nor can the role of aviation be omitted, which had great deployment and losses in both sectors. Still, the tanks dominated the scene, raising fields of sunflowers and wheat. Artilleries clashed there too, with the Russians presenting more than 6,076.2mm anti-tank guns and 920 Katyusha missile launchers. The Germans, for their part, had the Panzerjäger elephants, which also performed poorly and were vulnerable to infantry. Even more so, considering that in certain sectors of the defense, the Russians outnumbered rival troops with their artillery regiments by 5 to 1, and doubled in number of tanks, not counting their large reserves and repair capacity. The Red Army took courage, and by August 23rd, the battle had concluded without missing the recovery of the cities of Orel and Kharkov. The battle lasted a week on the northern front and almost 2 in the southern sector. The figure showed more than 850,000 casualties on the Soviet side and more than 200,000 on the German side. In this context, it is estimated that the Russians suffered the destruction of between 2,000 and 6,000 tanks and almost 2,000 aircraft. The Germans, on the other hand, lost between 1,000 and 3,000 tanks, along with just over 1,000 aircraft. The years passed, and the confrontation remained one of the great prides of Russia. However, recently, British and German investigations have come out which claim that the Red Army suffered far more losses than it initially admitted. Here we can again quote the photographer Yegorov. For every Tiger on fire, there were 10 of our T-34s destroyed. How could we send those photos to the newspapers? Many of them were not published. Even so, the Soviets commemorated the battle. And in this, it is important to consider that they not only used the military, but also practically all civilians in the region participated, whose tasks ranged from installing 4,000 kilometers of trenches to electrified obstacles and part of the mines. Although the exact figures are still not available, the consensus remarks that the Soviets clearly won, with the enormous tenacity that would make them reach Berlin in 1945. In fact, the former president of the American Society of Military History, Dennis Showalter, indicates that as they came from a culture where suffering was an everyday thing, by 1943, Russian soldiers had become better at inflicting pain, and there were many, many more. And now, to conclude, we want to ask you, do you think that the Battle of Kursk was the true turning point of the Eastern Front in World War II? Leave us your comment below, and don't forget to subscribe or activate notifications to learn about many more military events that left their mark on history. Thank you very much for joining us, and until the next video.